Thank you, everyone. Okay, so in this, we've made a slight change to the agenda to enable some general discussion time, because we understand that there hasn't been enough discussion. So we want to really encourage this next session to just be open discussion, but they have to be short, they have to be sharp, and it's about practical solutions. What happens next? Where are the gaps for you in getting things done? If this was a room where you could get what you wanted, what are those things that you need? Quantify them, specify them, and make it clear. Because once you do that, it makes it clear to us how we could help you, how we could work with one another, but also the value of this symposium is the connections that we can make. And this is why we had it in the first place. So, open discussion. Let's go out and begin.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm really excited about how the conversations have been going since yesterday. I shared it about with...
Sorry, just to interrupt you. Please slow down. Yeah. The translators have to catch up. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm really excited about how the conversations have been going since yesterday. The openness, bluntness, we've actually spoken how we felt. There's an issue I want to bring up, and I just shared it over the break with someone. I was saying it's around the issue of unpaid internships with UN events. Now, the UN gets us to live in some of the most expensive cities in the world, Geneva and New York. Asks us to live for unpaid internships 3 months, and the average cost of living in New York is about $1,500. It's higher in Geneva. You have to live in France and then get Airbnb in France and transport yourself to Geneva. People live in tents, and it's unpaid. I'm wondering, how can we have accommodation? These internships run year on year. The UN is always going to be here. So it's not a sustainable way. What it means now is that the only people that can do these internships that gets you a foot in the door are very rich kids, or if you're lucky to get funding from your state, national governments. Many national governments you can't even contact them to get this funding. And many times when you want to bring it up, it's an issue of, they see it in perspective of you advancing your own personal career and say, oh, look, it's for your own benefit, you put it on your CV, so go and source the funding for it. So I just want to ask, what has been the issue towards, even if you're not going to pay the young people, what is the issue around at least covering their cost of living? Because a lot of these jobs are done by young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll put that to the UN Commissioner in the room on the issues of unpaid internships. Any comments?
Why don't you take a few questions and why don't we do about a minute where you guys give us practical solutions or ask, questions, and then we can have an open discussion about it all. But let's get more people's input.
All right. More questions or comments? Vanessa?
Thanks. This is less a practical question of my own project and more a question to Dr. Alam Rabit about your foundation, Voices of Libyan Women, and what the challenges were with starting it and how successful it has been for the past years that you've been running it.
Yes.
My question is about representation. I've been to so many meetings and I see similar faces. I see the same faces in this room that I've met at so many conferences. And I think my education opened me to this opportunity, gave me these opportunities. But what about people living in the poorest countries who are going through all these challenges that we are talking about here today, child marriage, trafficking, who would never, ever get into a plane and come here and talk about their experiences? How do we open doors for those people? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
This is a really practical question, and developing on what Mariana was commenting before. If, for example, just like a hypothetical example, all the Latin population here gets organized and we start talking in Spanish about the SDGs to people that have no great access to this information, how much are we allowed to say, oh, we are part of the SDSN, or we represent this? What are the sort of requirements to represent that? Thank you.
Can I just encourage people who haven't spoken as much to also put your hand up? We would love to hear from you. Yes.
Okay, first of all, a clarification. Are we going to still speak? Because otherwise I'm going to make a comment.
Yes.
So we're still going to have our speeches?
Yes, later.
Okay, then I won't make my comment now. I'll make it when I speak.
Thank you. Yes, down here, and then Zina.
Two practical proposals as a follow-up activities for the symposium. One, in support of Gabrielle, I think is a request for mentorship. Like, we have visions, we have projects, we have sufficient knowledge, I believe, and sufficient experience to start a change. But it's really to break the glass ceiling and also to create a multiplier effect. As we have 13 years, time is going very fast and each day counts. So to really have a good leverage and a good multiplier effect after the symposium. So it's like hours of mentorship, like Sam said, made a shift in his pathway for leadership. And one is an intergenerational dialogue, like what do we learn from you out of your 30, 50 years of experience in the global agenda, and how can we make good use of that knowledge, not starting new or starting afresh, but really to learn from the previous generation and start acting.
Thank you. Sienna, then Marianne.
I just have one quick suggestion. Maybe before the panel gives their answers to this question, we can open the floor up to the delegates, because I'd really like to hear what, we all have so much experience. I'd really love to hear from the people in the room who haven't gone to speak what they have to say.
Exactly. No, and this is not just questions for the panel, by the way. This is open discussion. So you can make comments. It doesn't have to be questions. So open for all of you. Mariana, and then Zenia.
Okay, so I know that maybe many of you share the same desperation that we do to know if what we're doing is actually working. And this is not trying to be extremely pragmatical or anything, or technocratic in any way. It's just that I want to know if the human and all of the type of resources we're employing are actually working. Specifically, and we've mentioned this, on all of the trainings, on all of the education workshops, and all of these things. Like, really, what are you doing? I would really like to know exactly how are you checking how your progress is? How are you measuring the people that you're, like, actually reaping effort into? Just to know the directions that we're taking. If you can share some toolkits or a good book, or I know that we're all willing to do our homework this way, and this is something that I'm really interested about, to know how you're doing. The second thing is that I would really like to know about the mentorship you mentioned earlier before, Ala, is that how do you, when you're doing mentorship and trainings, do you actually bring it down into like a manual or stuff, or is it supposed to stay more organic? Like, is it supposed to stay more basic? How do you do that to be able to replicate it if you don't want to be the one doing it yourself and you want other people to learn how to do it as well? The other thing is that I think we're all really willing to do our homeworks. One book, everything, studying, going through all of the resources. But sometimes I felt, and I realized that I think I have an idea, and I think I found the answer to everything. And then I studied a little bit more, and I realized that someone already thought about that and that it didn't work or something like that. So like sometimes I think I would really, this is such a precious opportunity to get from your experience, knowledge that maybe you've already experimented on or for other people in the room. Like for example, sometimes if I have a project, I would really be so grateful to have the chance to bring it forward and actually get specific feedback. And have you realized that this step might be missing something? Have you taken this into account? That is something that I feel is unique and that I would really like to exploit in this session. And the fourth thing is thank you to the translators that have been there. Thank you.
Yes. Zinnia, and then we'll go to Patrick.
Yeah, so my question is regarding the work we're doing and what we're trying to do now. We were talking yesterday about quality education, something that when we're talking about fighting gender-based violence, something that's very missing is like comprehensive sex education in schools and colleges. And in the context of India, sex education is looked at very to introduce this in schools and colleges. So my question is to anyone here who's working or who has designed a plan or how to go about trying to pitch that to schools and colleges and make that very comprehensive. And two, to anyone on the panel who can think of ways or if we could leverage connections with the UN or SDS and to take it and introduce it in a more systematic way in schools and colleges, just instead of just doing sessions through our NGO work, and so that we can actually develop a program to make this a part of the system.
Great, thank you. Patrick, and then Malav.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've heard a lot today and yesterday is training and what resources do we have, et cetera, and for me, I actually think that that's not focusing on the right thing. I think we're drowning in paper, we're drowning in manuals, so I see the opposite problem. We think the solution to becoming a leader is to write a great book. I think the solution is actually going out and working together and becoming a leader. So I think we need to stop asking for free online courses and new books and new manuals and new paragraphs. I honestly, I don't know how many of us have who's actually picked up a manual that tells you how to be a leader and read through the whole thing and felt like you actually gained something from it. I don't think many or any of us in this room could say yes. So I think we need to stop asking for something more to read and actually go out and talk with each other and do it. The only way you're going to be a leader is if you become a leader, not by reading about how to become one.
Thank you. Interesting but provocative question. Go.
Yeah, I'm going to add up on Xenia's question raised and Patrick's as well, that yes, we can all be leaders, but I would say, for example, in India, there are so many different initiatives already on ground happening right now, and in fact, all over the world, but they do not know the languages which we are talking about, and they are not exposed to all these SDGs as they should be. So maybe we can bring in a platform, maybe this is one of the solutions where we can bring all of these, identify these stakeholders and bring them on a single platform so that they also talk the same language and they are exposed to a global, much more bigger global initiative, and they can learn from all of us as well.
Thank you. Molly, then Iman, then
One of the most common issues that I've heard here is a lack of funding, of just money itself to get our initiatives going. I think this is less of a challenge for people that are still attached to a university or in school, but for those of us either running our own organizations or like the CEO of an organization. So I'm wondering if we could discuss best practices for fundraising, discuss the potential of having a platform for us to exchange potential contacts and foundations that are relevant to our work, and just people who are really successful at this, just share your experiences. Thank you.
Great. Sorry, we said then. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just 2 points. Regarding the leadership matter, it goes without saying that, in my opinion, it's all about the question of its nature or nurture. I believe that it's kind of a mix of both. We live in a binary world where it's either this or that, but in reality, I believe it can be a mix of both that complement each other. So maybe we have to look into that as well. We do our research and then go in the field. And a true leader is someone who inspires other leaders. So let's take that in consideration. Regarding the sex classes, I'm not sure about the situation in India as such, but the subject in Malta is that sex is also still a taboo. However, what's working is the fact that we talk with the parents about it, not only talk with the children, but go also with the persons that have an influential effect on the upbringing of these youth, so parents, nurses, educators, etc. So it would be multi-approach on that matter, and I'm sure we can talk about it, so just to point that out. Thank you.
Sorry, Khalid, and then Peggy, and then you.
Okay, so just following on. So just following on from what Sam said about universities, having just started a university society, aiming to try and bring the dialogue of politics and NGO work and industry leaders into universities to deliver talks and workshops for the benefit of students. I'd just like to give this opportunity out now, that if any of you are in London at any point during the academic year, to get in contact with me, we could try and bring you over and to see if you can deliver your skills to university students as well, all for our own benefit. And then also to Sam again, is there a chance for us to open up similar chapters from the NCM within our own respective nations? And if there's going to be a timeline when it's going to be open in our own nations, like in the UK or wherever it would be, for our own benefit as well. So yeah, I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that, please.
Hi, I just want to add on to Milav's point on collaboration. So Milav mentioned that actually not only in India, but a lot of different places already have a lot of initiatives and programs going on around SDG or global development issues. But I want to challenge the point on partnership and collaboration. When we talk about collaboration, is it just mean that two organizations work together and then just organize an event or a seminar and something one-off? And how much do we know about our partner organizations, what kind of models they have been doing and what kind of areas of work that they are in already? How about doing more like extensive collaboration, as in maybe someone from one organization A going to organization B and really work inside the organization and then understand how they are tackling one specific issue. Then you can find out better ways to collaborate. Otherwise, I think right now the collaboration that we're talking is kind of superficial and cannot really achieve the real meaning of working together and creating real impact here.
Yep.
Sure, so a couple quick things. I wanted to ask, particularly of our hosts here, is there interest at the Academy or the Vatican more broadly to really just help facilitate relationships with religious groups back home in our respective communities? I think that's an opportunity for those of us who may not be necessarily already working with that particular stakeholder. We've heard a lot about mentorship, and that's fantastic. I think tactically what I'd like to see is SDSN actually leverage your extensive network to facilitate introductions to potential national or local mentors, just those of us who will be perhaps closest to the ground and have a better understanding perhaps of the communities we're already working in, the unique challenges and contexts. I think online mentorship is fantastic, but it's sometimes hit or miss, and it doesn't always necessarily work well. And then just more broadly, it's interesting because you've asked us what we need, and I think part of the challenge for us is without necessarily knowing what is available and what some of the limitations are, it's hard for us to be able to turn around and say, we would like this, because I don't necessarily know, what are the limitations, like how much, perhaps examples of what you've done for other people you've worked with in the past will just be a lot more informative in helping us craft better asks that are more informed.
I had one small question. I just wanted to ask, what are the key indicators to measure the impact which an SDG would have, like when a city is or a state is trying to achieve these SDGs, then how do we say that, yes, now we have achieved or we've reached this level? So what would be the key indicators to measuring this impact on a quantitative basis?
So just a small question, because I come from a university where sustainable development has become a term which used in general. We have symposiums based on sustainable development, but I don't see proper dialogue or guidance in terms of sustainability within those. It's just become a term. So how can we change it, or maybe use partnerships and collaborations to bring in real meaning of sustainability within the university?
Hi. I think it's very important that we ask ourselves, what does it mean leadership? What does it mean to be a good leader? How we as young leaders can improve, make a better impact, reach more people. That's definitely important. The world does need leadership, good leadership, but for me, when it comes to leadership, the best leaders are those that enable others so that they do not need to be led anymore, so that they are able to find their own way. So when I think of leaders that inspire me, are those that enable others to be able to make a contribution, to be active participants, to live their lives, make an impact themselves, not necessarily be leaders themselves. That's very useful. That's it's fundamental. But live their life and make a positive impact themselves in their small dimension.
I've been listening for the past day and also now to the questions in this room and the project and everything. And I get all the questions, but I'd like to break it down because I think the thing is actually simpler than we make it out to be. If we want to look for problems, we find problems everywhere. But I think there's a very simple guidance which my boss is preaching every day. It's start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. I think it's really that simple, and this connects what Professor Sachs was saying before on you can start locally just by doing something in your community, and it connects to also what Dr. Morabit was saying, that you can also go national and global with it. This depends on what you can do, what you have, where you are, and what you can do with it. I'd like to give two quick examples, practical examples on this. The first example is a project I did myself. I tried to make prisoners more visible to our society. I connected with my local university and decided to collect books, calling it Books for Bricks. So every brick that a prison has, I wanted a book to go with it. Because I believe that education in prisons is a huge thing to make people and prisoners come back into our society. And actually, we need to make the society aware that you need to also be open as a society to welcome prisoners back, because otherwise you don't have a chance. Yeah. This project costed me zero. I didn't have an investor, I didn't have funding, I had nothing. I simply took boxes from a local trash store. I used the boxes to collect the books at my local university, at the libraries. We doubled the books in the library. The project continued on without any of my doing for another year, because people they heard about it, they continued giving books, and this is a project that now supports 5 prisons in Austria with books on a daily basis. So this is simple. It was a week of my time. I had the support from my local university and from the prison, without which I could not have done it, but it literally didn't cost me anything. I used exactly what was there. The second example is an example of the organization I currently work with, the European Forum Altbach. Altbach is a huge network in Austria. And Altbach had one topic in 2015. We saw migration floods, as they were called in international media. We saw Austrian bureaucracy struggling, and we saw that the European Union was unable to really work with it. What they did is they decided if the big politics can't solve it, we need to go to the ground. We need to go to the lowest level. And what they did is they pulled 150 mayors through their networks to come to Alba, to sit together and to work on a peer-to-peer level. Because yes, you can listen to 20 academics, but you're not going to listen to them in the same way as you're listening to your peers and as you're listening and learning from your peers, which is also why I think this particular symposium is so worthwhile, because we can listen and to each of us in this room, learn from each of us in this room, and I think this is where we need to start, because this is where we are, this is what we have, and this is where we can go forward. Sorry for that.
I would like to ask the question, is the mic okay after that answer? Dr. Parker.
Bravo on those comments. I would like to share with you something that I think is really very simple, and we needn't be so worried about engaging on a local level. I'd like to share with you something I did as a young woman pre-women's liberation movement. In the United States, I came from a vast region of the Midwest. The indigenous peoples there were in desperate need of advocacy, the American Indian tribes in the United States. I had grown up with many friends who lived on American Indian reservations in the United States. I started working for an organization known as Heart of the Earth Survival School when I was 25 years old. I had not finished my college education, and I was working with the poorest people in the poorest region of the United States on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, and several reservations in Wisconsin and Minnesota. I just had a heart to do it. I did not have any education to work with Native Americans. I just had the heart and the desire. One day we heard about a man in Congress who was putting forth a resolution to abrogate all Native American Indian treaty rights. In other words, this particular congressman wanted to stop all American Indian reservations from existing. This was 1976. He'd gotten quite a ways out west with his ideas. We became very disturbed that everyone had to do their part in our American Indian indigenous school to teach the children the Native American ways. I simply decided one day that I would find one of the Native American lawyers that I had heard speak locally when I'd gone to a rally, a powwow in the Midwest. His name was Larry Leventhal. He's a very famous Native American American Indian rights lawyer at the time. And I went to Larry, and I was only 25, and I said, I heard there's a precinct caucus tonight, a thing called a precinct caucus. I've never even been to one, but is there some sort of, could you sit with me for a few minutes and put into legalese some sort of expression of my desire to block this resolution in Congress about abrogating all American Indian reservations? I don't know anything more, I just have a feeling we need to do something. Well, he was thrilled, so he sat down with me, and together we constructed a precinct caucus resolution. Very simple thing to do in America. I simply showed up at the precinct caucus. I was by far the youngest person there, and there came a point where they asked for people to introduce resolutions and read what you had to introduce. So on the area of human rights, I read this resolution about how to block James Aberesk from attempting to end all American Indian reservations forever. When I finished reading this simple resolution, everyone in the room cheered. I was not expecting that. I didn't even know what to expect. I really agree with Allah when she says, show up, just show up and be there. Because the next thing that happened was someone put my name into nomination to be a delegate to district caucuses, and I was voted to be the youngest delegate to the district caucus. So the next step was that everyone had passed my precinct resolution on the local level, so the next step was the district level. So I went and read the very same thing. It didn't take me any more work at all, and I took it to the district level. It passed there, and so then the next thing was to go to the state level. I was 25 years old. I hadn't even finished my college education. Very simple. I just had Larry Leventhal to be supportive of me, and the great American Indian organization, American Indian Movement, who helped me a great deal on this. They were advocates for American Indian rights and the occupation of Wounded Knee and so on at the time. So I was an advocate very early on for this. So then we got to the district level and it passed to the state level. Well, then the Attorney General for the state really liked it. And he introduced it at that level, and it passed, and it went all the way to the national platform and passed there as part of the National Platform on Human Rights. It started with one little tiny idea. I always think of ideas in a forum like this as a seed. You have to have a planter. Someone has to take the seed out of the bag and plant it. And then everything happens organically. It's not even really totally in your control. You don't know what's going to happen. But if you don't take that very first step, if you don't show up, like Allah said, show up, be brave, just show up, keep putting one step in front of another. Of course you need education, of course you need training, of course you need forums. But show up and plant the seed. You don't know where it's going to go. We still have American Indian reservations in the United States today. I'm very glad I did what I did that day in 1976 as a younger person than many of you in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Sure, Mariana.
Hi again. I think it's really important the point about showing up and just magnifying our intentions and the fact that we realize that we can do much more than we think we can. I think about the matter on resources, having enough funding to do stuff. I don't know about you guys, but in my experience, I've been doing Sintrata for almost 7 years now, and Sintrata barely had a bank account only 2 years ago. And today we're 5 in the staff, and that's a huge thing that makes us really proud. But before, we didn't have 1 peso, none of it, nothing. And what we did is just, we became really able, and if we wanted to get medical insurance for the survivors, we would go and knock on the door of a medical insurance company, or if we wanted to do anything, we would try to get more donations in species. I don't know if this works for you, but literally we were able to fulfill so many needs just by being there and just by actually reaching out to people about being passionate about that and sharing that. And something is that I think about the point before about having manuals and this stuff, I think it's really cool the idea about, you know, having these intentions and being there, but I do believe that there's a second step to stuff, like...
Mariana, just can you slow down a little bit, please? Tiny, thank you.
There's a second step to these things. Sintrata is now reaching like 30,000 children per semester. It's insane. And I just want to make sure that what we're doing is actually like, is the prevention we're doing actually working? And taking my dirty laundry out, sometimes I wonder, is this actually working? If a child is really desperate, will this prove its point? If we want to replicate the social reintegration model, I just want to say something. Did you know that Mexico has an amazing social reintegration model for victims? We're really proud of that. But if we want to export that somewhere else, we need to be able to gather a manual, not in a very technical way, just to be able to say, this we've learned, this has worked, this is our context, you can replicate it like that. So that is something that I would like to make a specific point on, the part of being able to put things down and to make assessments out of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Clayton.
I'll be as quick as I can. I sense that there's just frustration in the room from all of us, and I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the underlying reasons of why I think that that is. And what it comes down to is the fact that all of us, I feel, are tremendously educated. And one of those aspects of being tremendously educated, especially in a university system, is that you're exposed to the fallacy usually from around 4 years old until you're about 22, that life is sequential, there is a plan, that there is a set list of check marks, and that when you do those things, you advance forward. My training is in systematics and taxonomy. I'm also a trained geneticist. Unfortunately, I didn't use much genetics or evolutionary biology in my convincing of county commissioners to vote for making Orlando become a 100% renewable city. These are things that I had to learn on my own. I think each one of us feel an incredible sense of duty in our lives, that not only do we want to make these things happen in our communities, but that we want our lives to become being helpers. And we're trying to figure out how to do that. That means not just supporting our dreams and helping people, but it also means putting food on our own tables and finding ways for us to survive. We began Ideas for Us in a dorm room because we were very angry at the inaction that was going on around campuses. We wanted to do something ourselves. And as we advanced in building these pieces together like Legos, we realized that perhaps there's a model that we can utilize to create jobs for people, to support ourselves, to make this where we want to go in our lives, and to pull everyone else up with it. There's a saying that says, the rising tide raises all ships. And the tide is rising. And all of us here want to see one another succeed tremendously. And I think that we just are searching for that guide, like the syllabus that we've been handed to say, okay, do this, this, and this, and then you're a lawyer, or then you're a doctor, or then you're a scientist. But that doesn't exist for any of this. If it did, we wouldn't have the problems that we do in the world. The SDGs haven't been achieved because no one has figured out how to do it yet. In practice, we're explorers right now in our generation, the largest generation in human history. And that's quite a burden. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and encourage you all to just stay in the fight and to not give up.
I would like to just open it to Sam, Alla, and the panelists from the previous session, which I was one of, to comment on some of those. Maybe we'll start with Sam.
I'll be brief. I was speaking with Monsignor Sanchez during the break, and we talked about the role of morality and virtues in all of this. And for me, I think one of the highlights coming here was reading Laudato Si. And I just wanted to read this because I know a couple of you asked, you asked, how does our program work? How can you get involved? This is from Laudato Si. Social problems must be addressed by community networks and not simply by the sum of individual good deeds. This task will make such tremendous demands of man that he could never achieve it by individual initiative or even by the united effort of men bred in an individualistic way. The work of dominating the world calls for a union of skills and a unity of achievement that can only grow from quite a different attitude. The ecological conversion needed to bring about lasting change is also a community conversion. So for me, it's incredible to be here because I've spent 10 years just thinking about how we support young leaders. That's it. And to answer your question, the way we're going to do it, we're basically going to say, I think students know best what they need to affect change. We can inform them, we can support them, but let's find intentionality in how we convene. Let's create the framework. So students are going to be convening 4 times in 4 months to share peer-to-peer feedback, because all of us say we value collaboration, but then things get in the way and we don't actually follow through on what was really envisioned here in Laudato Si. It's not about each of our individual projects on their own succeeding. It's also about us really being in solidarity with each other. And so that's what we intend to do at 100 campuses around the world in 2018. Would love to partner with any of you to do that. And yeah, as much as there's frustration, I'm tremendously hopeful. I am tremendously hopeful about what we can all accomplish together. So I just wanted to echo that, and yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Sam. Ala, would you like to make some comments?
So I wrote down, oh shoot. Oh, no. It's okay. In Arabic, we say if something spills, that means it's khair. So it's good luck for someone, not me, because it spilled all over me. But great. So I wrote down about 19 questions that y'all had, and I kind of lumped them into 3 things. And I'm going to go over those 3 generally and hopefully give some practical ideas. But I'd really like to actually hear back from you guys on the questions you've presented more or less to one another, because I agree, a lot of you guys have this experience on the ground and can, thanks so much, thank you, can tell us how it's worked for you. So the first is representation, which is that we see all the same faces at all the same things, and mentorship, and I wrote / just do it leadership, because a couple of you have said leadership is when you just do it. So I'm going to start with the representation. I agree with you. There are the same faces at most events. And that's because oftentimes organizing institutions find the same, parachute down the same organizations and invite the same people, right? So if you are affluent, if you've gone to university, if you usually speak English, etc., you tend to be invited. Particularly if you're in a conflict or post-conflict country. And I think what it comes down to is most of those organizations are not going to do the legwork to invite other people, right? They won't. So it falls on us to create databases of people in communities, in our countries and in our cities who are doing good work, who we do think should be at these places, right? And really opening those doors for one another. And I think that's often a challenge for a lot of people because they feel like the spots are so limited, right? Like, oh, we barely get invited, so why? But I think what I've realized from my own work is the more you get other people in the room, believe me, the more that's normalized, and having youth in the room is normalized, and having them not simply there to listen, but actually to architect projects and plans, the more they include others, right? The more they recognize that, hey, if we have more inclusive committees of people working together to create projects, they actually work on the ground, right? They actually legitimately speak to people on the ground. So I would say open the doors yourself. I mean, you all clearly have access to different areas and different communities and different groups. So, I mean, the responsibility is kind of yours at this point. You're the privileged within your group, and it's your responsibility to open that door to others. The same for mentorship. I also heard that, we don't have training in our universities on the SDGs. I agree, and I'm a firm believer that you need to know what you're talking about when you talk. I do. I think I have learned very early that if you don't genuinely know, people assume everybody who looks like you doesn't know either. For most of us, we are representations of a much larger whole by virtue of us being the minority in the room. So know what you're talking about. When you take that responsibility, you're in the room, you really do actually need to do the research. That being said, when you go back to your own community, your university, your youth group, whatever, you're the expert. So that's a responsibility as well. That's what you've taken on. And that means at your university, if people don't know about the SDGs and you do, then hey, guess what? That becomes your thing. That becomes something you can engage on. You can say, listen, we need SDG training. We need SDG leadership. We need to invite Professor Sachs to come and talk about the SDGs, whatever it may be. But that's something you can facilitate and you can own, right? I think it's important to talk about funding. I do. I think it's important because God knows you're going to go through a lot of unpaid work if you don't talk about funding. And the reality is we can say things like we did it for $0,
But I'm actually going to challenge you on that, because time is money. And if you spent your time doing something, then it costed some sort of money. And second to that, what could you have been doing instead? Because that's going to become a question that becomes a lot more important as you get older. When you have to start paying bills and have to start paying debts, it's going to be like, wait, I'm doing this for free, but I could be having a full-time paid job in X industry. So why should I do this for free? And that's okay. It's not selfish, it's fair. You should demand to be paid for your work. You should demand to be paid for your time. And you should purposefully, and I genuinely believe very purposefully, put yourself in positions where they are forced to pay you for that, where you do not work for free, because it's not sustainable. You can't do it for 13 years. You cannot. And I've seen a lot of people come into this work, and I've seen a lot of people leave once family and social responsibilities started coming down on them. And the reality is, I think we need to have an honest conversation about what the incentives, what the resources, and yes, what are the funding streams? How do we engage in that? Is there a way in which we can make internships paid? Those are legitimate conversations amongst yourselves in your own communities, regionally maybe if you know funding mechanisms, but definitely having a platform and a database about how you can do this sustainably in the long term, so it's not just a pet project while you're in university because you have the resources and the access, but so you can actually carry it forward beyond that, right? And the last is connecting with others to ensure that you don't have superficial collaboration. So I actually don't mind superficial collaboration. I think starting somewhere is better than nothing at all. And I think the way that you actually learn about other organizations is usually through, superficial collaboration in the beginning, right? Because I mean, not a lot of people can go and travel for 3 months to another organization in another country and work with them. That's oftentimes you're doing this as a side to your academic work or your actual job, right? A lot of people, this isn't their full-time thing. You have school, you have family, you have other responsibilities that are keeping you in your community. So I don't necessarily think, unless that other organization is nearby, it's realistic that you're going to go travel and stay there for enough time to actually know the details of their work. Nor do I think you necessarily need to. I think you need to do research, find like-minded organizations, and collaborate. And that might mean that you guys do a campaign. If you work on public health, do a campaign and show the comparison between country X and country Y and why you both need the same things, and leverage leadership on the same day at the same time. You know what I mean? And create some sort of, but I don't necessarily think that initial superficial collaboration is bad. I actually think that's how you get to know other organizations in the space. And I think other organizations which may not necessarily feel like collaboration is their thing will see you working together and will also want to engage. And I think we do have to start there, because the most powerful thing I would argue about the SDGs is partnerships. And that doesn't necessarily mean you all need to work with each other. If you know that youth organizations oftentimes don't have a lot of power in your community, find organizations that do. Find organizations that have credibility. Maybe it's a religious institution. Maybe it's if you work on climate change and you can find an oil company that'll invite you into meetings and that will actually sign off on a lot of the things you believe in, leverage it. You might not agree with everybody 100%, but you don't need to. You need to be able to borrow credibility and access from one another, and you need to be able to create legitimate connections so when you walk into a room, you have a bit more authority. That would be my recommendations.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I have a few comments to make as well, and also in response to some of your questions. So you asked, there was a question about impact measurement, and I think, yes, absolutely, fundamental. As the saying goes, you treasure what you measure. It also helps with fundraising. If you can quantify your impact, it helps you make it helps you with donations and raising funds. And there are some digital tools that can help guide you on those, but really it's more about the key question that you ask yourself as well. How am I making an impact, and how can I measure that? And it's different in different areas. We can help you with putting you in touch with others who have done this, for example, but also provide you with digital tools. But really the fundamental question goes to yourself. Secondly, on the training on the SDGs. Yes, currently universities do not have courses on the Sustainable Development Goals or
they don't cover the cutting edge in the world of sustainable development, but we've got free online courses, some of them in several languages. As Professor Sachs mentioned, there's the Age of Sustainable Development, which gives you a nice overview. And there's also the shorter courses, the mini courses, which you can take in a day to give you an overview. So there are lots of resources out there on the SDG Academy. So if people want to learn and understand the basics of sustainable development, but to continue within it, to continue to learn within that sector, there is a resource available, sdgacademy.org. On mobilizing campuses, our plan is to try and create a framework of action for local on-campus fellows or ambassadors or coordinators, whatever you want to call them. And this is something Sam's been doing wonderfully in the US. But we really want to learn from those lessons and create a framework for action on campus. Now, this could be something as simple. You all talk about, okay, so how do we raise awareness of the SDGs? And I started thinking as well, I didn't have the answer. And I thought on a campus, going around putting posters and what we have in Australia called lecture bashing, which is we crash into a professor's lecture and we say, can I use a couple of minutes? They usually don't like it, but those are some ways. But you can't inform 60,000 students, for example, that Monash University has on the SDGs through a couple of actions here and there. So we thought maybe there is one common space that we can target, which is the university orientation process. Now, you do not have time in the university orientation process to drill down onto on the latest research on sustainable development. But what if you could do a very short presentation there, and people would at least be informed? That's just a starting point. Then the hard work comes in, which is to take action on campus, organize events, to really begin to organize projects. Then you'll need funding, and there are a lot of ways to do that. But these are some ideas. And if you have some experience working on campuses, come talk to us, because this is really the plan, to get thousands of campus coordinators around the world to mobilize these universities, because I believe that those can be wonderful launching pads. On mentorship, you said that mentorship can be incredibly important, and I completely agree. STSN is a network of experts, and what if I said we will try to create a process where we can put you in touch with those experts? What if I said we create a platform of a sort of a matchmaking? I don't know how feasible this is. We have to look into it, but this is something that we would like to explore. And if you have ideas on how this has worked in the past, let's have a chat, because I think if we can go out there and speak to experts and say, we have lots of passionate young people who want mentorship and expertise, then we can do that. So that's my comment on mentorship. On the SDG fund, just final comment on that. We are very serious about the establishment of a youth fund for the SDGs, where young entrepreneurs and young leaders can apply for small seed grants to get them started. It's a journey. It's going to be difficult, but it's something we're committed to. If this is something you're interested to help us with, come forward again and let's have a chat. But we know that funding can be incredibly helpful in scaling these projects and encouraging people to really work on this. But not just the funding alone, to also equip it with training, and then the mentorship that I mentioned, and try to connect all these dots. And these take time and a lot of hard work, a lot of conversations, and a lot of failures, but I think it's something that we're willing to step to the challenge for. So those are my comments, and I would just like to then pass on to Monsignor. Did you want to make a comment?
I want to speak about the religion, because someone, more than one, asked about this. We organize with the Academy of Social Sciences, with the Academy of Sciences, a meeting with all the more important religious leaders. We invite here, with the Pope, we invite here the Muslims, both traditions, the Jewish, the great tradition of the India, was here the charismatic leader Amma, many of you and also the other Christian denominations. In the end, all agree that the new form of slaves are a crime against humanity, and we need to recognize this. But in the end, the question for me, very important, is that to defend the human dignity, to defend peace, to defend freedom, to defend all the form of work, and to go against poverty, we don't need to agree in the contents of religion, because each religion have a special understanding about God that is very infinite, and we can put it center in one attribute or another attribute. So we can act together in the basis of a religious dialogue, but we can act together. It's not easy to act together to pray, but it's necessary to act together to defend the human dignity and the freedom of the people. And in this field, all religions agree, the more important leaders. And this is the essence of the religion. Thank you.
Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention to my last question about measuring where countries sit within the SDGs. So there is actually design framework, which are the SDG indicators. But you can also look at the SDG index and dashboards, which identify the key indicators and the gaps. So we can actually quantify where your country sits with the SDGs. And yeah, you can have a look at that online. Professor.
If this is going to work, and by work I mean that this group actually coalesces to be able to provide added value, the starting point is that this is a group about the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not a group about your individual projects. It's a group about promoting the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the first sign-on. Otherwise, you all have projects, and there are things you can do, and there are many wonderful efforts in the room. But for this to be a group that can provide added value to your individual work, it is about commitment to a global set of goals. That has a big advantage for you. It comes equipped with lots of things. You don't have to invent the objectives. You don't have to invent the motivation. You get a UN imprimatur attached to this, and that's to empower you in your advocacy, in your efforts locally. Of course, to be part of that, you have to be properly part of that. You're not going to get an imprimatur and then have no knowledge, no sense, saying whatever you want. No, this will be part of an organized effort. It has to be. I think it's worthwhile. The aim is that you are leaders. So you'll have to lead. Okay? Now, the second is you'll have to lead locally. I'm going to come back to that. Please don't misunderstand me. By the way, I opened a team last week to support young people to run for office in the United States around the Sustainable Development Goals. Not just talking about it, doing it, running. We're supporting candidates. I just want people to understand that. Okay. I'm not trying to disempower any of you. I'm also trying to help you to succeed. solve problems. What I was talking about is your experience in learning to solve problems, making systems work. If you want to make the medical system work, as we've been talking about, or you want to make community healthcare systems work, or you want to make the local electrification work, get some experience really of success. That's what you're doing. But I'm asking you also, put it under an SDG imprimatur, because that's both empowering for you and empowering for the SDGs. And we need both. You have to work for the SDGs. Why should one care? Why am I putting you to work for that? Because if these goals take no life, we lose something absolutely essential. One of the primary tools we have to actually change things in the world. If you don't believe it, this is not for you. Okay? I believe it, and I think it's important. That's my strong recommendation. So that's why I'm looking for that. I said it about 10 times, the dual affiliation. You're doing your projects and your SDG representatives. I think it's important, Sam, that it not only be campuses, but SDSN youth beyond campuses. Some of you are not at campuses. Many of you are. Campuses provide a structure that is very powerful. There are students there. There are experts there. There's intergenerational dialogue inherently at universities. There's intentionality of problem solving. So I really like campuses. But some of you are not at campuses, but you're in communities, you're in cities. We need that kind of leadership, very importantly. So SDSN Youth for Mumbai, not for a campus. Make it. Let's make sure we have that plurality of organizational activities. Now, in terms of what you're able to do and to do, the world is tough. Okay? There will be no fund that provides all your needs. Period. Okay? Every day, morning till night, I worry about money. Whether it's billions or thousands, that's all I do, morning till night, because I'm trying to push resources in a particular direction. Okay. I've been on an academic salary myself since 1980. I've never taken a penny from a government. I've never taken an added penny for any of this work. I have $17 due to me from the UN, $1 a year. They have not paid. They owe me 17 bucks. Okay? I'm not waiting for the 17. I'm happy to give them back the $1. I shouldn't say that on tape, but in any event, look, there's no general solution to this. The world it's a fight for resources. And it's a fight for resources that go to vast private wealth versus to the common good. I can't tell you that that fight's going to end anytime during your lifetime. I doubt it. I think that that has been pretty much an endless battle. It's your turn to fight the battle right now. Do not expect that somehow a miracle's going to occur, and you're all going to be paid, and everyone that wants to go for an internship is going to get it, and everyone is going to be able to do everything that they want. I've never seen the world anything like that. We will try to mobilize resources to provide support for this as a network. If we're lucky, to support a fund, but it will be modest, there's no doubt about it. Maybe it will be not modest if some billionaire comes along and says, okay, that's a wonderful thing. Who knows? But I'm saying don't count on it to to start. Really don't. So what does that mean for you? You're all experienced. I guarantee you, you've all raised funds. That's why you're here. You're still standing. Someone has given you a grant, someone has given you an airplane ticket, someone has given you funding for your organizations, you've done events to mobilize money. After today, nothing will change. You will still be trying to fight for money, for grants, for your financing. I have a strong recommendation to you to go to people in your community, to go to foundations, to go to governments. We will help you carry a flag of the SDGs, of the UN, if we are able to work out everything well so that you're responsibly carrying that flag also, because my responsibility is that you're responsible. And I want to do that. I want to empower you that way. But be sure that there's no easy answer to this question. That's what life's all about. I got to go home and fight $6 trillion of tax cuts proposed by Trump next week. He wants to take away $6 trillion from the common good in the United States. Why? So that he can pass along his family wealth, so that the corporate owners can get their taxes cut. It's unbelievable. That's a fight. So every day this is really a fight, believe me. So you have to be in that fight also. I don't think I have more to say. We want to support you. I want this to be a real group. I do not believe, by the way, that the way the world will work is that everybody gets a turn to sit in this room, or that everybody gets a chance to fly to a conference. I can do the arithmetic. That is not the way the world's going to solve its problems if it does. The way the world's going to solve its problems is you will go into the communities, lucky as you are, lucky as I am, and do our best. And carry the message and organize locally. And by all means, if you can do it, organize nationally and globally, but you sure better know what you're talking about, because there's no shortage of people who don't. And if you succeed in projects, then you'll take the next step. That's what I was trying to say. So I wasn't saying don't aim high. My God, we're all here to change the world for a real reason. But I'm saying get the experience, succeed. It's really good. Learn how it is done. Take the next step. Keep real. Be the best informed person in the room. Not just the best informed person. That's maybe not so hard in most rooms. Well informed. That's really hard. It's not so hard to be the best informed, but it's hard to be well informed. Really hard. To really know what you're talking about, that's a tremendous amount of work. Okay? So I can't tell you that this is easy, well-funded, secure, but I am asking you to go carry this flag, carry the work. You will be supported, but not as much as you want, not as much as you need, but you will be supported. And you'll be together with other people who are doing the same things and working really hard at it. I'll just give you, I don't want to make it personal, but I'll just tell you, it's extremely rewarding. It's worth it from my point of view. I'm not trying to send you down a blind alley. I think it's a great way to spend a life.
Very brief, thank you.
Very briefly. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel that a lot of us here, young leaders, are already engaged in a lot of things, and we already feel a calling to do meaningful work in our communities. We are already doing that stuff. We already know that funding is difficult to access. We've probably gone out of our way exactly to knock on doors that were closed, to do projects with zero budget. So we already have that experience, at least that's my feeling. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge that maybe not everyone knows how the UN works, what SDGs are, or what SDSN Youth does, and so on. My understanding here is that you would like us to put our work in the context of the SDGs, which most of the times is really easy to do, because if we look at it closely, it's totally doable. So that's fine. Personally, I feel inspired by what I'm hearing, but at the same time, I'm already doing the work that fits into an SDG. I know that. I'm very happy to be doing that. I've been working on the MDGs before. And I also acknowledge that people don't know. So my question here is, we have heard, okay, SDSN is doing this, SDSN Youth is doing this. We've heard of the resources. There is the Age of Sustainable Development, where we can learn more about the SDGs. We heard about the SDG Academy. We've heard that we need to access universities and kind of join forces in the fight, peaceful fight, towards the sustainable development. I think a question here is, okay, I'm particularly working on SDG 16. I'm happy to join forces. I just really want to know how concretely, if you have any suggestions on that, if there's anything that we've been missing. And when you're talking about the action plan, what exactly are you expecting from us, and when is that space for us to really just, okay, sit across the table from each other and, okay, guys, let's get to business on this SDG, on the other, and see how we can collaborate. Because the brief that we've received before was come and share about your work. And now we understand, yes, it's a lot about the SDGs, which I, for one, am happy to join into, but I think I need more clarity on what exactly is the direction that you envision. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, you have a meeting.
I just want to, because I know this is what I would like to hear by the end of the day. I would like all of you to be leaders of a global network. No, you're not part of a network. You are right now, you're here together, but you're leaders of your own efforts. I would like you to become leaders of an SDG network, supported by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, helped to be enabled by it, but you've all come as local, highly competent, very engaged people. But you're not a network until you leave the room as a network. That's a big difference from my point of view. When you go home and do your, where are you based?
I'm from Romania. I work for an organization in The Hague, and right now I'm based in Rome.
Okay, good.
I'm a European citizen.
So you're a network of a network. All of you are living in different parts of the world, and you can contribute from where you are, and both from organizationally and geographically. My own idea is that you continue in an active way as a network, not as having spent 2 days pleasant or unpleasant here, but as a network. I think that there's great added value for many of you, or most of you, or maybe all of you, I hope, for that. If not, don't be part of it. It's extra work. But the idea is that you will leave here not only as empowered by contacts and what you've heard, but actually organizationally. So I'm asking you to tell me organizationally what you think. Organizationally. And to understand that there is an ability to support the organization in a limited way. Not to fund your projects, I'm sure. Not right now. But to fund a network, yes. You see the difference. Communications, organization, meetings, virtual meetings, engagement, helping you to make globally known what you're doing, that's what a network does, and also helping you to do more of what you're doing by being part of something that extends around the world. That's what I'm personally hoping for. That's the difference.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly wrap up this session, but one very important point that I want to make is that for this lunchtime, I want us to really try and brainstorm on the task that we've been set here. So we've had a lot of discussions, we've had a lot of ideas, but I want us to discuss the mechanism for creating an SDG network which SDS and Youth can help run, and what would that look like, and how we can help it become a successful network. And what I would like you to do, please, if you have ideas, come to me, so I can begin compiling them with the team so that we have a solid work plan by the end of the day on how we could start rolling this out. Secondly, there was a mention of aligning your existing work to the SDGs, where there is a very simple tool for that. It's called the SDG Indicators Wizard. You put in your organization's objectives, it spits out the targets and the relevant SDGs that it's aligned to. Of course, having these tools easily accessible and available is very important. So one thing that we can also do as SDS and Youth is to create a portal where you can have access to this information, access to SDG Academy courses, access to these tools for impact measurement, access for alignment activities, and lots of other things as well. So we want to be able to do that, but also to the networks. So you can actually connect together outside of this, using technology that's sitting here in an effective way, so that when we want to do a campaign on a certain thing, on a certain topic, we can mobilize quickly, effectively, and all around the world. Campuses, cities, doesn't matter where it is. That's what we want to see. I think that's all. Thank you.